we're going to build this awesome arrow, and I'm going to show you a great little tip on a miter saw to cut well over 50 degrees. Let's begin. Now for this project, I'm going to be using a 1x2 furring strip. I usually find these at the back of my local store, kind of away from your standard lumber. Now if by chance you can't find any furring strips, you can always take some 2x4s, rip them down on the table saw to about 3/4 of an inch thick. Now our furring strip is 8 feet long, we only need 4, so we're going to cut this in half. Now if by chance you have any markings from the factory, this is a good time to take some sandpaper and remove that. Now our first cuts are going to be for the fletching, or what some people refer to as the feathers or the wings that come off the back of an arrow. I'm going to cut a 45-degree angle, and then I'm going to flip it over and about 4.5 inches down, cut an opposing 45 degrees. Now that we have the first one cut out, we have to cut 3 more. But just keep one thing in mind, these don't have to be 100% perfectly the same, as long as they're pretty close. Now that we have the fletching cut out, I want to cut out the tip or the point of the arrow. Now the fletching's at a 45-degree angle, but I want the point to be a little bit steeper. I think it would look a little bit better, maybe about a 60-degree angle. Now most miter saws can do 45 degrees without an issue, but most can't do 60 degrees or more very easily. That is, unless you set them up. And just before we set this up, I'm going to cut 2 more pieces of wood off of this board at 7 inches each. To set up your miter saw, we need a scrap piece of wood, and preferably a long straight piece, but I'm trying to save a little money on lumber and I'm going to use a couple other scraps. Now we want to make sure this is the full width of your miter saw and will fit all the way across it. Now we want to glue our wood to the base of our miter saw, over here on the side wings. Not the center piece, because this is the piece that pivots. We want to keep that mobile, but we want to glue it to here so the wood doesn't move. I'm going to be using some super glue to hold this wood in place, but if you don't have any super glue, you could use double-sided tape or any type of adhesive, as long as it holds the wood nice and firm. Now if you have one solid piece of wood that goes all the way across, the quickest way to do this is just to put some super glue on both sides, take some accelerator, spray it on both ends of your wood, carefully flip it over, press it up against the fence, and then slowly lower it, making sure everything is still square with the fence. And that'll quickly dry to your saw. But if you're going to be using 2 separate pieces like I am here, there's a couple more steps. Now when we're doing a 2-piece method, we want to line up one side so that the edge is just past where the blade will come down. And then we want to take a pencil and make a reference mark over here so we know exactly where that's at. Then we're going to move it off to the side. We're going to add some CA glue right across the edges here. Now we want to take some accelerator and put it on our wood. You want to carefully flip it over, making sure we keep it nice and flat against the fence, looking at our reference mark, and then we just want to slowly lower it down onto the glue. Give it a few seconds, and it should be nice and firm. Now before we attach our second side, we need to trim off the overlap to make sure everything is nice and flat. Now it's time to attach the second piece of wood in the same fashion, but in this case, we're just going to make sure it is butted up against that piece of wood and flat against the fence when we glue it in place. Now that the wood is attached firmly to your miter saw, we need to make 2 cuts. First, 45 degrees to the right, and then 45 degrees to the left. And now we have a 90-degree reference point between these 2 pieces of wood to make these cuts faster and easier. Now if we needed to make a 45-degree cut, we would leave the saw in the 0 position and slide a board in leaning against one of these 2 boards, and it will cut a 45-degree angle. Except we want a 60-degree angle. To do that, we now need to rotate the saw 15 degrees. And now when we go to make this cut, it'll be at 60 degrees. Now please keep in mind, anytime you modify a tool to work differently than it was originally designed for, means it can be very dangerous, so please be very careful. Now to keep my hand from getting too close to the blade while I'm cutting this, I added a clamp to hold it in place. Now that we have the point ready, I need to cut the shaft with a corresponding shape. So in other words, roughly halfway on this board, I'll cut 60 degrees and then 60 degrees. Now to hold all this together, I'm just going to use some CA glue again, because this is going to be some decor up on the wall. Now if by chance this is going to be moved around and jostled a good bit, you might want to consider wood glue, but it will take longer to dry. Now for the fletching, I'm going to have the first one even with the back, and the second one about a ½ inch ahead of that one. After everything is glued together, you can add some sawtooth hangers to the back, or you can add some ice screws to the top and run a string across. And there you have it, a great looking arrow. Now this is ready for stain or paint or do whatever you would want to it, and then you can put it up on your wall and it would just look fabulous. Now the great thing about this is you can make this for just family and friends, or you can make a bunch of these and sell them at crafts fairs. I'm sure a bunch of people would like these. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this project, so get out in your shop and have fun building.